guys. Okay, in this step, what we're doing is showing some of the techniques we'll be using in the demo. Basically, what I'm doing here is just creating a value scale to match the one from the photograph. So I'm building 4 different values, starting with the lightest, and then gradually adding a little bit of more neutral tint until we get to the last one, which is going to take neutral tint just about as dark as it'll get. And here we have a wash technique. What I'm doing is blending in clear water to muddle the wash and create an effect that's not uniform. And here, if you can see down at the very bottom of the video, I'm painting around some shapes to show you how I save my whites. Moving right along. So here we have the reference photo we'll be working from. And then what I'll do is change that to a black and white image and then blur it to replicate what it would look like if you squinted. The reason for squinting is to remove the detail and just see the major shapes and light and dark patterns. Then using Photoshop, I've done the same thing, breaking this down into a 4-value image. So here we have the reference photo, and I am pointing out the different values I'll be using rather quickly. And then here's the first wash with that lightest value. It's important to know that watercolor is going to dry quite a lot lighter than it looks when it's wet. So prepare for that. And then I'm carefully painting around my reserved highlights. These are things that are hard to get back. You can do it in opaque, but I think it's much cleaner when you can do it just by painting around objects. If you look at the way I'm running this wash, you see the bead is coming down in a relatively uniform fashion, meaning that it's I'm not painting something too far down the page and allowing other bits to dry. And that's, this is something that comes with practice, but it's something you can get. And continuing, I'm just using a little clear water there to wash out a bit of the shadow that I've pushed or put under that arch. And then leaving the tops of cars and things like that with the reflection. But it's, especially in this first pass, it's important to combine as many shapes as you can. So again, a quick look at the reference photo to plan out the move. And now I'm using negative painting, or painting around things, so that they'll stand out. The whole process is the same. I mean, you start out and you reserve your highlights, which are the white of the paper. In the next step, you reserve your highlights again, but you add something to the mix, meaning that you then paint around more objects. And this starts to add to that layer or a feeling of layers and an interest. So this can go quite slow, and obviously I've sped up the video quite a bit to make that easier on you. But again, you'll see me quite quickly catch up, since I've gotten quite low on the page there with the right side. And you see little tick marks that I'm making just there. Architectural detail, what have you. Leave it up to the imagination. You don't have to paint everything you see. And then being careful in that archway there. And there's me spraying a little bit to keep the wash wet. But you'll see that again, the bead has now reached a point where it's at the same stage or the same place in the painting on the left and the right. And that's the real trick of painting in this fashion, is making sure things don't dry and not getting too involved with detail in one portion of the painting while the water dries on another. You'll see down at the bottom I've started mixing in a little bit stronger value there, but that's just me not being able to stop myself. You don't have to do that. Although strength and solidity do help anchor a painting. Sorry for the hiccups there. Here we go. And done. So here we have the recorded second step. On to step 3. And with each darker layer, what's happening is as you're painting one layer on white paper, it looks fairly strong. And as you put something darker on top of that, you send it back, and you keep sending things back. So things that are strong initially will become your lights, and eventually you'll work your way up to fairly strong value, but that's maybe 5% of the painting should be your strongest values. And that's, of course, there's no ratio or rule to that. It's just something to keep in mind. I always say don't clobber them over the head, meaning, keep some subtlety there. And I'm dropping in some cobalt. I said I was going to do this as a monochromatic, but again, I just cannot help myself sometimes. So that's me starting at the top right. And I've feathered out the wash on the left, meaning I dropped in some water above where it was wet to allow me time to paint on the right. And there is a little bit of burnt sienna. And then back into that that mix of neutral tint. Continuing down the page. That little area at the very bottom, in the right corner with it's actually my wife and a little taxi, I think, can become a little problem or troublesome. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to simplify that and not have so much action going on at the exact corner of the image. So I've dried everything here, and now I'll continue that darker wash on the left side. I was able to do that because I did feather in that clear water, and there is some burnt sienna going into that mix as well. If you want, you can certainly paint around the entire window and then get to a point where you're comfortable and come back and put the little details in the windows. It's just finding out tricks and shortcuts that work for you. So there I'm starting to add some foliage from the trees. And my easel is shifted, I think, so we can see things a little bit clearer at the bottom. And I'm starting to put in some fairly strong darks. And there's that arch again, and cobalt blue. Trust in these shapes. I mean, either if you're squinting when looking at something, or if you've actually run it through a filter in Photoshop, trust in the shapes that you see. They'll make the objects right if you draw them correctly and in proportion. They won't, it's quite often they won't look right until the very end. And as always, a watercolor does go through certain stages of looking quite nice to looking horrible to hopefully looking quite nice again. So keep that in mind. Don't change your game plan to suit the painting unless that's what it needs. Catch-22. So there's the scan with all the bits in. Now we move to our final darks. And here we are putting in the final darks. Just little brush strokes here and there for detail or to suggest texture. I'll use clear water to disguise edges and make them go away, or to bring in deeper value, which is exactly what's going on there. We need some strength at the bottom. The painting needs to sit down, so to speak. And that's, you see me here taking in these, or putting in these darks. Continuing to fuss with details a little too much. But who's counting? I think that's working well. And the final pass, which is the final pass. I'm trying not to be too fussy with that car, but it's getting me. And then the very end, just a little cadmium scarlet, just a touch of color. And do it so carefully. So there's the final. I think as a lesson in Saved Whites, it's working quite well. Here's some detail. It looks more complicated than it is, which is always kind of a good thing. Thanks for watching, guys, and check out my other videos. Take care.